All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know we have quite a few that are still going to be jumping into our session here today. We had an amazing registration turnout, and we're just really excited about this conversation today. Um, just want to introduce myself. I'm Erik Stegman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. My mother's family is from the Kettle First Nation, which are the Nakoda people in present-day Saskatchewan. And we're a national advocacy coalition of funders, tribal community leaders, and others who are all working together to increase philanthropic resources into our tribal communities, but to also make sure those resources are more in line with our values and our worldview as Native people. I am really excited for this conversation today. We're going to jump right into it here shortly, but wanted to just share a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we regrettably will not have Secretary Holland joining us today. She was going to try to make it, but was not able to, and we hope to be able to invite her to a future conversation like this. If you have any questions for the panelists that come up, please do share them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of our conversation today, and really looking forward to your feedback and your questions. We'll also be keeping track of all of the information that's shared in the chat box. So there'll be a lot of resources that we're going to be sharing, and we'll be following up with links to any of those resources that are shared after the conversation today. So with that, just to explain a little bit about how we came into this conversation with our partners here today. This is a really important moment where our nation is really reckoning with its energy future. And for too long, funders have not really fully understood or appreciated the wisdom and the unique legal and political power that our tribal nations bring to the table. Many of our tribes have had to rely on extractive fossil fuel-based economies for their energy needs due to generations of failed federal policies and a severe lack of financial resources. Today, though, we're really here to listen to our partners tell us about how we can change the course of our energy future. And it's time to change how we do that in Indian country. Tribes have always fought for their self-determination in government, their educational and cultural systems, and now it's time to support them in a just transition to energy sovereignty. If we're going to support tribes to transition their energy resources, we need solutions that are really at scale. And this requires a close coordination with federal partners, Native-led non-government organizations, technical partners, and philanthropic partners. Today, you're going to have an opportunity to actually learn from a public-private partnership in action that's really helping define a new pathway toward energy sovereignty for tribes. For a lot of those of you, or for many of you out there, you may not understand that Native Americans are nearly 3% of the US population, but receive less than 0.5% of major philanthropic dollars in our communities. We need to dramatically increase funding to Native organizations and in order to invest in this kind of a just transition to energy sovereignty. I should also mention that one of the things we have really put a lot of work into recently at NAP is to start to build a new platform that we're calling the Tribal Nations Initiative. That's going to be a platform for tribal leaders and tribal staff to be able to strategically engage with philanthropy in a way that they haven't before. For too long, a lot of our philanthropic partners have been working on a lot of these important issues like climate, but our tribal leaders and our tribal staff are not often at the table. And they're the ones who need to be at the table to make these kinds of decisions and to be able to really cultivate these public-private partnerships that are really going to shift how we do energy sovereignty as we move forward. So with that, that's why we're here today, and I'm really excited to introduce you to our partners. But to give you a little bit of a background on the partners that we're bringing here today, we're going to share a short video with you about the Northern Cheyenne White River Community Solar Project. This was actually made possible between the tribe and many of the partners you'll be hearing on the call here today. Red Cloud Energy, the Red Cloud Renewable Energy Center and the Indigenized Energy Initiative with the MacArthur Foundation. And so we're going to go ahead and pull up this video to just share a little bit about that work that's happening, and then we're going to jump into some conversation and introduce our panel. So Kelsey, if you can pull up that video, please.
Our Cheyenne people had lifeways that have come through the eons, centuries. They learned to live in the environment and did minimal disturbance in the environment wherever they lived.
I think probably to all people, the sun played a significant role in our day-to-day lives. And we don't have that anymore. It's like we're turned around.
The Tzitzistas, the people of the sacred arrows, they believed that we were related to everything. So when you talk about the sun and its importance to us, it's our relative.
The lifeways of our old people need to be remembered, need to be followed, and their wishes for us to continue to live as Cheyenne in the Cheyenne way. If our people solidified the foundation for renewable energy, it would mean that the coal would stay in the ground and our people wouldn't have to turn to it.
The tribe in 2016 passed a renewable energy initiative for the tribe to pursue renewable energies as hard as we could.
Solar energy offers us a chance to regain our independence as a nation and stop reliance on fossil fuels. It creates jobs and helps us move towards a clean energy for the next 7 generations.
Energy sovereignty is freedom. It's projects like this built, designed, maintained, and operated by Northern Cheyenne tribal members. The energy from these projects going to wherever the tribe sees fit.
I'm really all for these kind of projects. I think that's a good source for employment, that's a good source for sustaining our culture.
This is a life-giving force, and the sun is sharing that with us. And we can use that to share with others. It really is about giving.
I'm really proud to be a Cheyenne. I think it honors the sun that we use it in this way.
It is the reason why we must pursue renewable energies, so that the sacrifices of our old people will not go disregarded, and that we can live on in ways that will be friendly to the environment and especially the Cheyenne lifeways.
Indigenized Energy Initiative is partnering with the Northern Cheyenne to launch the White River Community Solar Project. This project will build over 1 megawatt of solar on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana. With this project, we will build multiple solar arrays, install 15 residential solar systems for the Northern Cheyenne elders. And we're also building a workforce by embedding training programs into projects. And we want to be able to continue to do this now moving forward in a way that protects our sacred sites, protects our water, and protects our animals, and protects our future for our future unborn and the generations to come. And that's what this White River project is going to do. It's a $4 million project. Northern Cheyenne was able to secure $3.2 million from the Department of Energy, but they need to raise 20% of that total project as a match. So IEI is committed to making this project a reality, and to do this, we need to raise $500,000. So I ask you to please help us spread the message. Please like and share this video on social media and donate what you can so we can make this project a reality. So I ask you to please join us in this initiative and this project and help IEI and the Northern Cheyenne Reservation become energy independent.
Thanks so much. That was a really inspiring way to start us off. I just love, one of the things I most love about my job here at NAP is just being able to provide an opportunity for funders to see this work really happening on the ground and to really get a sense of where they can really make an impact. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. As I mentioned before, we really believe that if we're going to help tribes at scale around these major issues like energy and climate and our environment, we have to do this in partnership with our federal partners, with our philanthropic partners, and our tribal leaders and their staff and our nonprofits. So today we're going to really try to help you get a better sense of how these kinds of partnerships come together and what the potential is for future projects in a call to action here toward the end. I'm going to first introduce Wahleah Jones, who's joining us from the Department of Energy in the Office of Indian Energy. And Wahleah, could you tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what the office does, and what are some of the exciting things going on for you at the federal level when it comes to tribal energy right now?
First of all, thank you for the invitation to participate today, and all of you who are listening in. I think the video that we help to support that project is just one example of the possibility of putting funding, federal funding, but also private public investment to make it a reality. And especially for Indian country, which often I see that there is, there's not a lot of resources to support, or even staff to support sort of this build out of the clean energy vision. And I think it's important for, diverse contribution from everywhere to help support tribes to reach their energy vision. And our office has been established in, I guess, since 2010, and we offer technical assistance, financial assistance, education, and outreach. And we just announced a notice of intent this past week on Tuesday that's going to put aside $15 million for funding opportunity for tribal buildings that are not connected to a centralized grid. So, and then we put out a notice of intent last week on supporting projects like this that we just saw is, and I think, for this office, the Office of Indian Energy, we've supported about 200 projects. And the cost share has been, I think, a big barrier for tribes, because sometimes the 50% that's required has been, we've had listening sessions and heard from project leaders to tell us that, even the application can be also challenging for tribes that don't have, the technical assistance or capacity in the front end. So to do a successful application. So yeah, those are all the things that we're hearing, and we are making adjustment actually in this upcoming, in the NOI, we are going to reduce it to as low as 20%, and we could go lower. So that's exciting. And this is a real role for philanthropy to help build partnership. And that's one thing that we really suggest. We work directly with tribal nations and tribal leaders, communities, and that partnership. And we value our trust responsibility to communities, but also tribal nations, tribal leaders. And this relationship and understanding is also important for philanthropy to understand, or private investors to understand, is that it's not just transactional. There's a relationship that is really key in building healthier communities and a healthier country, and also planet. So I'm really excited about the funding opportunities we are going to be announcing, and to continue to support projects like what you all have accomplished. So just really congratulations.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, I think you gave a really good glimpse into a lot of what we've been hearing. We've been, as part of our Tribal Nations initiative, co-hosting regional conversations with tribes and tribal leaders and staff and nonprofits all over the country. And one of the top things that gets raised in these issues is things like cost share. And it's been really great to see how many of our federal partners are really working to try to reduce some of those barriers. And we're going to get to talking about where philanthropy can be supporting some of that work in addition to our federal partners as well. I'm going to ask Chief Henry Red Cloud to join us next. Henry, can you tell us a little bit more about the Red Cloud Renewable Energy Center? and tell us about who you are, where you come from, how you got into this work, and what's the kind of work that you're doing there at the center in this space.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Greetings to one and all. My name's Henry Retcloud. My parents are Bernard Retcloud, Christine Retcloud. My grandparents are my father's side Retcloud and Kills Enemy. My mother's side is Ghost Bear and Ironheart. I come from the Oglala band. Within the band, I come from the Bad Face Tioshpaye, the Bad Face band within the Oglala Lakota. Yes, I started solar back in 1997. I visited NREL and then further on went and visited SEI, Solar Energy International, and got the necessary, training and certification within those years. We're located in a southwest corner of South Dakota, home of the Oglala Lakota. Yes, I opened the doors. How I got started in solar was, thank goodness to Gaga Google, Grandpa Google. Back on my profession was, structural steel. I spent a lot of time out off the res, 15 years in fact, and then returned home. I found myself on both East and West Coast and all in between, helping build some of the man-made wonders and high rises. But my heart was always in Indian country. I returned home in 1995 and thought, my heart wanted to stay. And I found myself in the same situation as where I left before, no jobs, no homes, and returning back, I wanted to do something about that. And I basically asked my relatives here, wherever I saw them, if they had a wish that they could have, what would that be? And it didn't take them long to respond. And they all pretty much responded in the same way, was getting back to the old homestead, getting back there, we had healthy food. Everybody was happy. We had our own livestock. We were coexisting with the earth. So what's it going to take to get back to that? And I felt the same way. So I then in turn done research through the Bureau of Indian Affairs and found myself reclaiming, utilizing ancestral lands, and encouraged a lot of people to do the same. So there's a whole wave of, people that reclaimed and start utilizing their homesteads. So with that, I started to look at home designs, looking at homes and how much, people can afford homes here. Homes are beyond that reach there. So I found myself volunteering up and down wherever things were happening on surrounding natural build. With my construction background, I was able to learn quite a bit and then bring that home. In that process, I met with a couple of old friends of mine, no longer here. They made their journeys. In 97, I met with Bob Goff and Patrick Spears. I met with them and they asked what I was doing. And they said, what you should do is get into some renewable energy. So at that point, I start Google searching and I got involved. I downloaded information on these solar hot air furnaces, basically the 1970s concept of hot air heating, solar hot air heating. And then I manufactured one. I built a crude one. Lo and behold, it worked. And that's how I start getting involved into solar. And I found that partnerships are key. Very key. Tribes run on a shoestring budget. There's not that much money available for them to invest in, let alone matching funds and that. So So I took it upon myself at that time and went and opened the doors to Lakota Solar Enterprises in 2003. We manufactured a solar hot air furnace, implementing 21st century material and coming up with 30% savings on the homeowner on the super hot box, basically 4 by 8 foot square, 32 square foot of heating surface. And what our unit does is it's a standalone system, there's a small PV panel off to the side, a 50-watt panel, which then energizes the blower, which is then thermostatically controlled at any given moment. It can be minus 40 degrees outside. We're pushing air, bringing air from the home, heating it up, and then pushing it back into the house at 120 degrees. Further on, when I start working with the tribes, when I mentioned solar, they immediately thought electricity. So I did everything that I could, getting certified, working with the SEI, and partnering with them, and then opening the doors to Red Cloud Renewable Energy Center. We're a training facility here. We had pretty much close to 1,000 students come through our program with all the 3 phases of solar, hot air, hot water, and solar electric, standalone system, grid tie, battery-based systems. We've been in existence since 2008, when things were happening around the Obama administration. The ARA money was, coming through to tribes. We worked with some of the programs, the DOI underneath there. They have the workforce program there, the 477 program. We was able to create almost 500 jobs working with tribes at that time surrounding our solar hot furnace. And further on, getting tribes acquainted, educated, giving them the tools so they can have that their toolbox on solar electric, and all the phases there. And then 2012, I was recognized as a White House champion of change in solar deployment, creating economic opportunities. And I shared lunch with the president at that time, Barack Obama. So it's been a incredible, journey. 2008, then I formed a nonprofit, redcloudrenewable.org, because I know that, tribes run on a shoestring, budget. So what we do is we seek out funding, and offer scholarships. We have this wonderful program that we've been running for the last 3 years. Actually, 1 year we're getting back into it now because of the COVID. We're all aware of that. Anyway, our T4 program consists of tribal train the trainer program, which we train tribes to become instructors, business owners, installers, design technicians, maintenance technicians, and that. So through that endeavor, we had pretty close to 1,000 students now come through our program. Just a little history background of what we're doing, and would like to again mention that partnerships are key. There's no time to reinvent the wheel at this moment. We came past that 30 years ago. What we need to do is partner up and move down this green path together so we can be more effective. We can do things. Funding's always a must. That way, we're looking this year. We're looking very seriously in bringing forward a training program surrounding microgrid systems throughout Indian country, seeing how we have the expertise here. So we're going to go forward with that and start to design some systems around microgrid. So yeah, that's total. That's new, as well as we have this other new thing happening, which is going to start up this fall, is our energy auditing course with applied weatherization. They both walk hand in hand with a solar and energy auditing weatherization walk hand in hand together. We here in Indian country, we get people designing our homes around here that live over in a Southwest, territories. Here we are in the Northern Plains where it can get pretty cold and pretty hot. We as, natives have been placed on reservations that nobody wanted. You couldn't grow food, you couldn't do hardly anything. But it was sure enough sunny, hot, and windy. Over time now, we have something that we can trade, we can offer. We as nations within a nation, NREL did a study, National Renewable Energy Laboratory out of Golden, Colorado, did a study throughout Indian country, 574 federally recognized tribes, and they found that there's a potential of 61 gigs that can be produced out of Indian country. So that's quite a bit of power. What we need to do is get our people trained, for this upcoming workforce. Solar and all these renewables are happening so quick and are going to happen so quick within this next 7 years that there isn't a workforce. We as natives, solar is our way of life, our language, our culture, our ceremony, our song, our dance is all based around on Petui, the life-giving force, the sun, so we have been embracing. Now we're just taking this new way and honoring that old way and then becoming sustainable. Each and every project that we offer here has an economic base to it, creates jobs, businesses and that. So that's just a little bit about what we do. I'll talk more, but pass the feather, so to speak, to the others so they can introduce themselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. And that's a beautiful way to sum up that just amazing journey you've been on for so long. I think it's really important for especially those who are new to working with Indian country to understand how we look at this kind of work in our values, right? And it's just amazing to hear kind of what you've been able to build up from a technical expertise just from the ground level. And those are that's the kind of knowledge and skills that we need to be able to bring out to other communities. And with that, I'm going to turn to Cody. If you can tell us a little bit more about the Indigenized Energy Initiative, and how you came to this work, who you are, where you come from, and if you can also speak to a little bit of how you're working with partners like Henry and others to be that important sort of infrastructure builder and partnership builder along with others.
Thanks, Erik. How madakiapi. Thank everybody for attending the call today. So glad to be here. Energy really excites me, especially on tribal lands where it's needed the most. My name is Cody Two Bears, enrolled member, and currently reside on Standing Rock Reservation, which borders 2 states, southern part of North Dakota, northern part of South Dakota. Our reservation, landmass wise, is about the 5th largest landmass tribe in the country. I think we're at around 2.3 million acres of land within our reservation boundaries here in the Northern Plains. And how I kind of got into this work and why I feel like energy is a really key component for tribal nations moving forward is, for so long, we've been really focused on, language, culture, traditional medicines, sustainable housings, just different types of things like, food sovereignty within our homelands. And our people never really thought about energy, that they didn't think it was really important back then. But I think, moving forward, as time evolved, I think we started to understand how important energy really is within tribal communities. And right now, I think the spark level of that, of the tribes that just really, really interested in providing their own energy, renewable energy, it almost falls right in line with our traditional customs and who we are as Native people. It really falls in line with that, with our environmental work, how we can protect and preserve the land and create energy within our communities, I think is the most important piece. But I think, knowing that, energy now plays a big role, just like food sovereignty, just like traditional medicine, so we can truly become sovereign within our homelands. And we don't have to continue to keep outsourcing a lot of times. because I think that's kind of the issue in Indian country not right now with the high utility rates that a lot of Native Americans face. Some of our, HUD homes, and the HASDA funds we get from the federal government, our homes ain't, well insulated. They're really cookie cutter type homes on a lot of reservations where, energy that we produce in there just kind of flows right out the door. So, not only do we pay the highest energy costs in a lot of areas, we also use, 5 times as much energy because we can never hone that energy within our homes. So, energy plays a big role. In the southern states, it gets hot down there. In the northern states, it gets pretty brutal and cold. And energy plays a big role on, life and death situations, even today on reservation life. But why I got started in this work is I was elected into the Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Council from 2013 to 2017. And a lot of you know that was during the No DAPO movement. I was the leader of that community of Cannonball during that time where they hosted all the encampments and brought 350 plus tribes from all over the country, organizations and people from all over the world, stood on my homelands there in my community in Cannonball. And one thing I've learned through that process of meeting 350 plus tribes that have come to my homelands is they all shared that same vision, that same passion of wanting to know more about renewable energy. If anybody had a chance to see pictures of the encampments there, the people were producing their own energy with little wind turbines. People were bringing solar units on trailers, pulling in there. I mean, it kind of created a life of its own there, with, 15, 20,000 people that were on site there. And it kind of inspired a lot of people to want to know and learn more about renewable energy. But I think, why I helped, I'm a co-creator of Indigenized Energy Initiative. Of course, I have a team behind me also that is co-creators of this. And why it's so important moving forward is because knowing that Native American tribes and Native American organizations and just Native American people in general within their homes, why they want to learn about renewable energy. The only issue is there's no resources for them to really hone into right now. They're very limited out there on who they can bring in, who they can trust, and who can really, put this plan to work for Native tribes. Of course, we know the Biden administration and Wahleah, she just announces a lot of great funding opportunities out there right now through the federal government. But some of the issues that Native tribes face is that it's fairly new to them. They don't have that technical assistance of applying for grants or knowing what the lingo or the language is and how renewable energy works, or even knowing is renewable energy beneficial where they come from, because we all know the local co-ops and different places, they all have different policies and PERPA rates and different things like that, right? That can affect their plan within their local economy and where they live. So knowing that, there's a lot of questions and still a lot of uncertainty for tribes. And knowing that there was a need there, that's why Indigenized Energy Initiative was created, to help assist tribes in that manner. But not only do we, help with federal grants and the planning process for tribes, we also help them with training. Like you heard Henry say, partnerships are important. We partnered with Red Cloud Renewable, and we were able to empower 30 different solar warriors through Indigenized Energy Initiative through his program that we put to work from 8 different tribes with all the projects we do within Indian country today. And a lot of those solar warriors that we were able to train are going to be deployed to Northern Cheyenne, the video you just watched, right? So that does create jobs, that does empower our communities to get out there and learn a new way, like Henry says, that honors the old way, that also gives our people the tools to be able to combat climate change. We see a lot of people protesting and create awareness, but at the same time, I feel like, our organization is providing those tools to be able to combat that, right? And there's not too many organizations out there that are actually doing that work today, and things like that. But on top of that, training and everything within tribal communities is important. But I think the most unique piece of what IEI can do for Native tribes is bring that trusting factor to tribal nations, tribal councils, tribal leaders, tribal people, because Native Americans are hard people to trust. They don't trust particularly anybody outside resources. We've seen so many times that outside contractors want to come in, and sometimes they don't necessarily have the best interest for Native tribes. They're just there to make a buck or make money. So we want to look out for Native tribes to make sure that the people that they partner with or the people that they're bringing in that are looking out for the best interests of tribal nations. Because in the past, I say, philanthropy is good, we're creating that bridge now, finally, where, you know, your video, you just saw that, you know, sometimes the match of 50% is very difficult for a lot of tribes that don't have a lot of economic status in the country. There's a lot of them. I'd say about 90% of tribes right now have a hard time with that 50% match, right? So they have to find alternative resources. But with Indigenized Energy Initiative, what we're able to create is that bridge to try to bring in people like, you know, Foundation that's in this call today, Christensen Fund, and also bring different types of resources to the table to start to help Native tribes through this creative process of planning and making sure that what we put in place is going to be successful for the next 30 years. I think far too often, and what happens in high poverty communities, not just in Indian country, but around the world, is we put a lot of great infrastructure projects on the ground through philanthropy or whatever it is, foundations, or, you know, just people that want to donate money, federal grants, but they don't spend the time to empower people on the ground to be able to learn, maintain, and sustain these systems, right? So IEI is one of those unique type of organizations that does just that. So not only are we partnering with, you know, foundations and getting grant money for tribes, we're also empowering people on the ground to maintain and sustain these systems at a local level for natives, by natives. And that's exactly, I think, the most important part that, you know, really keys in and hones in on really empowering tribal communities moving forward. But I think the most important thing moving forward is energy now falls in line with everything we talk about, you know, traditional medicines, language, culture. That's that last tier, I truly believe, to become truly sovereign within your homelands, and energy does just that. And I think Native tribes now are starting to sign up more than ever from what we're seeing right now. And they're starting to be more outlets for them. And Indigenized Energy Initiative is just one of those outlets to do just that.
That's great. Thanks so much, Cody. And yeah, you hit on so many, you know, just really critical themes that I feel like we hear across our work. I think, you know, one of the biggest things is that, you know, as Native people, our relatives and our relations are really our superpower. And I think too often philanthropy finds that to be a little too complicated. But really, once you actually do the hard work to invest in organizations like yours, to build trust, to be able to do that work together in a meaningful way, you start to build that lasting change. And just also really appreciate the work that you're doing on really creating that lasting infrastructure with the leadership on the ground, because that's the other part of this that that this is really going to take if we're going to help tribes across the country do this work. And I look forward to jumping into more of that with you next. I'm going to turn to the philanthropic perspective on this work next, and we're going to start with you, Kate, from MacArthur Foundation. You know, I'm always really excited to lift up funders like you who've actually partnered with tribes and done this work, because we have a lot of amazing funder partners out there who, you know, invest in nonprofit organizations, grassroots organizations, but a lot of other funders find it a little challenging to figure out where do you best fit when it comes to a partnership like this that's actually getting this work done, that's actually a partnership between our federal partners, our tribes, and our nonprofit partners like Cody's. So can you tell us a little bit about you and your work there at MacArthur, and how did you get involved in this work, and you know, how does MacArthur look at this kind of an investment in a partnership like this when it comes to energy justice?
Sure, yeah, thanks. It's a complete honor to be here today with this group. So first, thank you for having me. I'm Kate Barnes. I'm a senior program officer with the Climate Solutions team at MacArthur Foundation. The MacArthur Foundation is based in Chicago on the unceded lands of the Potawatomi. I come to this work with a background in natural systems management and over a decade of work funding rights-based resource management efforts led by communities and Indigenous peoples, mostly in the tropics. And I'm now bringing the lessons, you know, from that experience to MacArthur's efforts to support a just and equitable clean energy transition. So MacArthur is working to respond to this critical moment in our history. While, you know, I mentioned I'm a member of the Foundation's Climate Solutions team, MacArthur's support to IEI was actually part of a special pool of funds that we made available last year to address the twin pandemics of racial injustice and the COVID-19 pandemic. A portion of those funds were dedicated to supporting the self-determination efforts of Indigenous peoples. And the goal was to uplift Indigenous communities to enable autonomous pursuit of a recovery that was guided by their culture, their priorities, and their practices. part of the cause of the disproportionately poor health outcomes within Indigenous communities and tribes resulted from energy insecurity. So while IEI's work is a lovely complement to the climate solutions goals, the funds were provided to IEI not necessarily, they weren't driven necessarily by our goal of climate mitigation. We were responding to a moment by putting more funds into the hands of communities that bring their lived experience to solutions and need more resources, a lot more resources to make those solutions a reality. So what was especially appealing about IEI for us was their focus on supporting tribes to access much larger pools of funds, either through the private sector, government, et cetera, that are actually needed to implement energy transition and energy sovereignty. So in this way, we see them as playing a really critical technical and facilitating role in tribes' efforts to pursue energy sovereignty.
That's great. Thanks so much. And yeah, I always appreciate kind of hearing how funders have come to this work too. I feel like with a lot of this, we've been trying at NAP to really help funders take sort of a step back and think about what they learned in this sort of moment that we've just gone through between the pandemic, you know, the racial reckoning in America, because a lot of funders finally did stuff differently and were investing in new ways. They were, you know, unrestricting grants, doing all kinds of things. And we're seeing some real outcomes from that. It's a lot of the stuff that we, you know, at communities level, we've been asking for a long time. So it's really exciting to hear about that and to think about how we can help work with other funders to do that in a more sustainable way. I'm going to go next to you, Shawn. We've been working together a lot lately at the Christensen Fund. Would just love to have you, you know, tell us about who you are and introduce yourself and your work at Christensen. But I think specifically, just for some background, NAP and Christensen have a big partnership in the conservation and land and marine management space right now too, where we've created a new collaborative that's very much like this, where we're trying to both bring the power of philanthropic resources to some of these infrastructure groups, capacity building groups, and to also create some new pooled and flexible funding to have tribes access new federal funding opportunities that are out there. So can you tell us a little bit about, you know, how Christensen is coming into this energy and climate space and you know, what you're hoping to do as we move forward together to invest in more of these partnerships?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks. You know, Eric, when I saw that you were the moderator, I immediately felt bad. I was like, oh, he's stuck with me again. Because Erik is correct. We have been working together a lot since really early January, just kind of almost a weekly thing, poor guy. So thanks for being willing to stay on the panel, even though I was also on it. So, you know, so the Christensen Fund does one thing. We provide philanthropic support for the advancement of the inherent rights, dignity, and self-determination of Indigenous people. And I think we're the only foundation who does that. And if it sounds like I'm bragging, it's because I am. We're exceedingly proud of our mission. We're exceedingly proud of what we do and how we do it. And the reason I think for us, this energy initiative is important and getting into this energy space is important is because of self-determination is our purpose. There are really three things that a people can control that will give them autonomy. It's food, it's water, and it's energy. And we are happy and proud to be on the side of providing tribes directly with the means that they need to be able to enforce their own self-determination and rights. And so, you know, Erik mentioned this partnership between Native Americans Philanthropy and the Christensen Fund, where we put together a tribal collaborative funding opportunity for philanthropy and intermediaries to really provide direct to tribe funding, because one of the things that got mentioned earlier was how little funding there is for in philanthropy in general for Native communities. Well, one of the things that I think Erik has alluded to several times is that not only is there little funding for Native American-led organizations in general, the amount of that going directly to tribes, of that little amount that exists for Indian people to begin with, is almost none. So, you know, for MacArthur and other organizations to be partnering directly with tribes is rare, really rare, and something we want to change and something we commend them for, something we are dedicated ourselves to. roughly, I think roughly 40% of our budget for the United States is going for either direct tribe support that we're providing ourselves or for conservation, or providing through this collaborative that we have with Native Americans in Philanthropy. Part of what we're excited about now is as that partnership has gone on, we found ways to, through external means, as the federal government, so thank you, Wahleah, has come around on their ability to try to lower barriers for tribes to access some of this public funding, as other foundations who are sort of intermediaries, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, for instance, have come around to try to provide some means using this collaborative that we have now to, in conjunction with those, to really help magnify the amount of philanthropic dollars that can help access these other dollars for the benefit of tribes directly. And so energy really becomes important as we start thinking about the ability to self-determine. One of the very interesting things to me about renewable energy specifically is what that can mean is that we don't have to destroy tribal land or exploit tribal land to be able to monetize the resources that we have. And what often happens, almost always happens, in fact, is when tribes have a resource that can be monetized, usually the largest beneficiary of the actual resource itself is off tribal lands, it's off reservation. That energy is going to somebody else. It's not going to the tribe. When we mine coal, when we mine uranium, any of the other means, as we're transitioning into this sort of a green energy phase, this the nickel and the other kinds of lithium, those things that are being mined, that the exploitation of that resource, so the direct beneficiaries are cell phone companies and battery makers for electric cars and so forth. It is not the people from whose land those resources are coming. What renewable energy will allow tribes to do is A, not exploit those resources that you need to destroy the land to exploit if they don't want to. Obviously, self-determination is what it is. And so if there's a way that tribes want to still be able to use those resources, they can, but this will allow them to not have to do that. And secondly, what it means is the primary beneficiary of the energy itself will be the tribal people, and the excess that they can create will allow them to monetize that in a way that the primary beneficiary of the monetary benefit of the energy will be the tribal people themselves. And so for us, that is a tremendously exciting future for Indigenous people, but it also means that our core purpose, supporting the self-determination of Indigenous people, couldn't be more in line with something than this kind of energy initiative.
That's great, Shawn. A really helpful sort of, I think, multiple perspectives and kind of how we can do this work together. I think one of the reasons we're really excited about this partnership we have gathered here today is how it can connect to the other kinds of partnerships that are doing this federal, this public-private partnership work. In the work we're doing together around the conservation and land management space, one of our big goals is to create as best we can a one-stop shop for tribes and tribal partners to come and not just talk about how to fit what they're trying to do into these narrow federal funding streams, but instead to come with their vision about what they're trying to do to protect their lands and waterways. Hear the vision about energy, and as you've heard, its impact on our culture, our language, our ability to support ourselves, to get away from these extractive systems. I think a lot of what we can learn as we bring these different kinds of partnerships together is how to continually refine how we do those kinds of partnerships, to coordinate those resources, and for philanthropy to actually show just how much every dollar you invest can actually leverage these federal resources that are actually owed to tribes through our federal trust responsibility. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to you, Wahleah. Would love to hear from you. Where do you think private philanthropy can best support some of the kinds of work that you're doing at the Department of Energy? Are there ways that foundations can invest in some of these opportunities around match, other kinds of infrastructure organizations? Would just love to hear, what philanthropy's role can be in a partnership with you and your federal partners.
Yeah, I think just this model that with the video and highlighting the possibility of leveraging federal dollars through Department of Energy. And we have some good models out there already. We have the Just Transition Fund. They support coal impacted communities with grant writers or grant writing assistance. So they offer funding for the community to apply for federal funds. And I think something like that can be a role for philanthropy, but also many times on the technical assistance piece, if you're a tribal nation, you can request technical assistance at no cost to our office. So I can put it in the chat how to do that or where to find that link. But any tribal nation can request technical assistance from us, and we if we don't know, the answer, we'll find a lab or someone to help with. We do technical analysis, financial analysis, and then also strategic energy planning. So thinking about, some tribes are probably trying to figure out where to start. And I actually took part of a strategic energy planning process in the Southwest with one of the tribal nations, and they pulled their community together, their leaders, but also the elders from their village together into one room, the youth. And they had like a 2-3 day planning process around energy, looking at their history and then looking forward. And there's amazing facilitators, native facilitators that do this process. So they're out there and would love to, continue to share those resources with you all. But again, as Cody mentioned, Indian country in general, amazing organizing around community resilience, it's really underfunded globally. We as a conservation, focused area, the biodiversity, 80% of the biodiversity is located on Indigenous people's land worldwide. And if we're talking about really trying to make an impact on the climate crisis, we want to make sure that we are investing in community place-based strategies. And because I, for one, have seen that the 10 years that we've invested in these 200 plus projects in Indian country, you see the immediate results in cost saving, in building capacity internally within the tribe, and then also expanding. I mean, many of the tribes that have done these projects, they continue to grow and implement, microgrids with solar, battery storage, wind, and you name it. I think that we're here to help support like the foundation, that community commercial scale. We also have the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, which has an opportunity right now for the bigger scale projects. They're able to do direct loan. They have that direct loan authority right now. And so there's this window of opportunity, and the bipartisan infrastructure law, I have to mention it. We just came out, the White House came out with the tribal playbook on the bipartisan infrastructure law. So all the provisions that are geared towards Indian country, and they have climate resiliency in there. They have water infrastructure, roads, broadband, and energy. So I can send it all in the chat, but I'll make sure to let you all know where on the energy front, what the provisions are that can best support workforce development and all of these pieces, manufacturing and clean energy development, which is really exciting. And I think the piece that I definitely love about our office is that it does, the idea of bipartisan infrastructure law is to strengthen our energy security and to make sure that we are climate resilient. And if we are able to power our own communities, our own nation, that's significant. And that helps to, for the long term, bring more stability to our communities. So, and I do believe in renewable energy, and I do believe in all of the work that everyone is doing to address the climate crisis, because we're on a short window about right now, even to address, get our emissions down to decarbonize. For this administration, our aim is to go 100% clean energy by 2035 and net zero by 2050. So these are ambitious goals, and we all need everyone to, to participate in this. And I do want Indian country, I do want tribal nations to be leading the way towards this 100%, clean energy economy and vision. So, but I'm here, and I'm going to put my email in there in the chat too. So, you all can have my contact and see if we can set up more conversations and how to best work on this. But I do see a huge role for philanthropy. And I don't know if you all know about the Justice 40, but they're creating an accelerator, fund just to support frontline communities to apply for these federal dollars. So I would love to see something similar for tribes and all the communities that are pursuing this.
That's great. Thanks so much, Wahleah. And yeah, we're, as part of the follow-up, and we'll get to that toward the end, we're really looking for opportunities to work together with our partners here to provide regular engagement with, our partners like you in the federal agencies, because it's really important. We're doing this, Shawn and I too, with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that just put out their new RFP on co-management opportunities. And I think anywhere we can have these cross-sector meetings and engagements and share and coordinate information is really important. We're going to come up on some Q&A here soon. So if you've got any questions, please do drop those in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get those in the Q&A. I'm going to go to Henry and then round it out with Cody before we go to Q&A. Henry, just listening to the conversation so far, I'd love to hear anything else that you have to say about how how you come to partner with the different communities that you're working with. What are some of the challenges that tribes what are some of the challenges you're seeing tribes have in accessing these kinds of resources for these energy projects? And what are some of the opportunities that they see? Where are some of those barriers that philanthropy might be able to help them overcome? Would just love to hear a little bit more about how some of these partnerships develop at the ground level there.
Yeah, it's always, the difficulties around getting projects up and running with the tribe. I'm so happy, impressed with this new administration, being able to let some federal dollars go, as they know climate change is a huge problem throughout the country as well as globally. So it's always been about funding. Tribes run on that shoestring budget, being able just to run the current programs that they have, but it's always been around funding. And then as I've been working throughout Indian country today, what I did was I went out and visited the tribes. I showed up with a solar trailer, an off-grid, battery-based system. I showed up in their parking lot and just put a PA system out there and started to talk about solar, brought tabletop solar projects. I brought a array of things, lighting, water pumping, and all of this, and bringing that to their attention, and being able to share with them and offering our own way of meeting with each other's tribes. There was always gifts exchanged, so I always took something to give them to install, like our solar hot air furnace. I took and exchanged and was able to talk with the decision makers, and I have since our existence, we have now a awesome staff which do a lot of research around federal funding around clean energy. So we were able to share that information with the tribes, having them being able to apply for the funding, pointing out where the funding was, and to help them to apply for it. Was able to be very effective that way. Tribes are unaware of funding 10, 12 years ago. That they had the wonderful ideas, they had champions within their corners, with tribal council, tribal president, and that. And but it was always, where is this new money? And that's what my team did, was to find that new money, and then share that with the tribe. So currently today we're working with over 70 of the federally recognized tribes on their clean energy projects, residential, commercial scale. So being able to help tribes, pointing out funding where it's available, and I found that was very important. Tribes then said, aha, there's where the funding is, and being able to apply for it and then receive the funding and then go forward. So so that's to answer your couple questions there that you had there.
That's great. It's just amazing how many projects are. I remember, actually, Henry, it was several years ago. I think it was for a Solve MIT event out at Standing Rock. Maybe you were doing one of your demonstrations, and it was just amazing to see how that technology works on the ground. I didn't know most of the technicalities behind it, but I certainly saw the potential. And Cody, I wanted to go to you last before we go into some questions and answers. I think one of the things that's hard for philanthropy to understand in these public-private partnerships sometimes is the role organizations like yours play, because there's so many different pieces that you're sort of having to be involved in to really be able to coordinate capacity building, funding, some of the technical partners, and then in some cases you're having to build up new leadership and infrastructure kind of from the ground up to make sure that it's sustainable and that you can continue to serve more of our tribal partners. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of how that's getting done? How are you doing? Like Henry brought up some good examples of just all the different ways that tribes are trying to just even know about funding resources and how to access them. And writing a federal grant's pretty different than dealing with private philanthropy. So just love any reflections you have on playing that critical role.
Yeah, I think, like I said, everything has to tie in together to create a successful project. Of course, like you said, tribes are always seeking help with funds, different types of ways they can get assistance for different things. But that's one avenue of help. Another avenue of help is to offset some of those matches that we talked about, whether that's through philanthropy, foundations, anything like that. But I think the most important piece beyond, funding, once it gets funded, is to make it a reality, right? To put the plan into action that you currently have in place. And I think that's what, some of the hard work that really comes into making sure that these projects are successful in Indian country, is to do it in a way that's unique to everybody, every tribe's needs. We got to remember, every tribe is different out there. Their visions are different, their perspectives are different, and how they want things done are going to be completely different. So that's kind of not necessarily the difficult part, but that's the part of where, IEI can really truly help tribes flourish within their own vision, within their own plans, within their own homelands. And I think that's the most important piece of this work, is that once we get the plan set, we get the funding through the door, we get the philanthropy and foundations to hear about what we're doing, to actually put the plan in action. I think the most powerful piece is doing the work on the ground in a way that we are empowering these communities to want to come out of their shell, want to be better, want to do better in their communities. I think we see a lot of young people, a lot of young Native Americans now that just want to be able to combat climate change, just want to be able to get the tools in their hands to do great work for their community. And basically the biggest thing is opportunity, right? To create these opportunities on the ground within these Indian communities, to be able to have them do something great within their community so they can start telling their own stories within. And I think that's the most important piece behind doing all this great work, because we can have all the money in the world, we can bring all the best foundations in the world, we can have the best plan. But one thing I've learned through this line of work with IEI partnering with tribes, I think we're about 14, 15 months in now within our work, is that when we start to empower people on the ground, we can build all the best infrastructural things in the world. But if we're not empowering that next generation to learn and maintain and sustain what we're doing and what we're talking about, what we're creating then is for nothing, right? So that's the last key element on what's so important with a lot of these renewable energy projects. We cannot just make it just a phase. right? And I think with Native people, like Henry always says, we have to make it a way of life. Put it as a way of life for Native people. So it's just like, you know, it's accustomed to, oh, I'm gonna go set up a solar unit on my home, because we all know what happened with Texas, you know, 11 months ago. They just all of a sudden shut their energy off. And then that's never happened in such a long time, that affected millions and millions of people. And by having to rely on outside resources our whole life, we can't rely on that anymore, because energy, people are using energy more every single day. So the energy usage is growing as we're sitting here today. But knowing that there's not enough infrastructure that's being created to maintain that energy usage within the world, within the country. And that's going to start to affect more microgrids, grids across the country, where they might automatically just shut down on you with no notice, and things could happen. So by learning these little ways of doing things for natives, by natives, that gives them the tools to become truly sovereign within their own homelands, to know exactly how these systems work, how they operate, how to maintain and sustain them. So I think that's the most important part. Is what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, Wahleah is saying, different other people, is become their own tribal utility at some point. There's a lot of tribes that have that path forward. They want to do that. You know, they just need assistance to be able to do just that, to be able to control and maintain and sustain their own energy, so they don't have to continue to rely on outside resources. And to me, that's really, truly sovereign when we talk like that and think like that. And I think all tribal nations are wanting to pursue that plan. But right now, they're just in the beginning stages. Like Wahleah said, they have a lot of questions. They have a lot of concerns. It's too new to them. So, you know, Indigenized Energy Initiative, and why we created what we did, is to give them the confidence to be able to pursue a lot of that in a positive way. And the last thing I'll say is, doing energy within your community, especially renewable energy, one thing I've learned is it's actually healing for Native people. Some of the projects that we've done in just the last couple of years, we did just remarkable input from the community on how it just lightened up their world. And by giving them that opportunity, because Native peoples have been so oppressed for so many years, they've been, you know, their voices have been cut off. They weren't able to talk the way they were supposed to. But one thing we've learned is that by doing this process with renewable energy, that brings healing in the communities in a way that it brings these younger people to rise up and want to do more and learn more, and not just help their own community, but help other tribes as well. It just gives them the confidence to be able to do more within Indian country. So very inspired work. So when you talk about money, all these other things, it's great. But one thing I really truly see is that it really empowers Indigenous communities as a whole.
Oh, so many great points there. I think just, you know, from what we've seen on a broader level with our Tribal Nations Initiative, just the very idea of approaching these issues from our viewpoint, like you said, our messengers, our people, when you put that sovereignty frame on it, it changes the whole conversation. When we've been going around talking to tribal leaders across the country, one of the first questions they ask is, what is philanthropy? You know, like, why would anyone understand what this ridiculous Western institution is? But when we start talking about what you were just saying about, you know, how we can bring the systems back the way that we know that they should be working for communities, it's really different. So I just really appreciate that, Cody. All right, we're going to have about 10-15 minutes of Q&A. I'm going to be sharing some of the questions we've been in the chat box with the whole panel. So whoever wants to jump in, just please keep your responses brief so we can hit on a couple of these, because we've been getting some great questions and feedback in the chat. I'm going to start by asking, in addition to funding, what are some of the biggest capacity building needs to support a just transition? It sounds like we've heard grant writing and identifying funding. Are there other things that haven't been raised that you've heard so far? Anyone want to jump in on that? Like other big capacity issues?
I mean, we hear the sort of community assistance. It's a little different than technical assistance. And I think it goes into the strategic energy planning process, but just somebody just, or, you know, we had this opportunity through EDA for Indigenous and coal communities. And, you know, it's community specific and regional specific. And I think that there were some challenges with, like, you know, lack of funding and resources to help them, these communities, which are, you know, I know for some that are really rural and remote, to organize. The other piece is that there's a need for translation. I mean, many, like where I come from, majority of everyone speaks Navajo. So it's like, to translate that thinking and planning into English for proposal, that's something that, I had to understand, and also, do some education here at Department of Energy that, hey, we need to really look at the way that this application process is going throughout the federal agencies, and be sensitive to communities that, predominantly speak their own language and organize in their own language. And that translation piece is really key, I think. And so that's just some sensitivity, I think, that even philanthropy, as people are writing for grants for you understand that, Indigenous communities are very diverse, and they do and think in their own language. So when you're asking for applications to help streamline that process, and also the reporting process, I'm just saying this because I used to write for grants a lot prior to this.
That's a ground level view when you have to write those grants for at the tribal level. It's very different. That's really helpful. Another question I wanted to throw out there for anyone, I think this is probably one of the biggest ones we get on this kind of work, especially because, Wahleah, you had mentioned things like loan guarantee programs. We deal with a lot of those through Department of Ag and others. Often they're some of the most underutilized programs in some cases. So we had a question about what is the appropriate role for private capital in these tribal energy projects? So there's a lot of different ways that you need philanthropic investment. In some cases, it might be planning, it might be, investments to get technical assistance off the ground, but other cases it might be loan guarantee programs. Would anyone like to jump in and share, where do you need private capital the most?
I can jump in. So the Loan Programs Office has a Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, as I mentioned, through this omnibus appropriation that we were given about, 8 weeks ago, or maybe 8.5 weeks ago. In there, the Loan Program Office was able to, there's this amendment that they made that they, for tribal energy projects, they can get, they don't need the third party entity that they have to go through to give the loan guarantee, that they can get direct loans through the Federal Reserve. And so I think this is a huge opportunity, and we're trying to identify big projects, like 20 million plus projects that tribes want to pursue. And I do think there's a role for also, when you talk about those type of projects, you want to make sure that, there is support for tribes or communities that are pursuing the bigger projects and investment, that someone's on their side and guiding them in the right way that is not, that is sort of in the best interest of the tribal communities, and fits all of their requests on community benefits agreements is one big thing that we are looking at is, with these project structures, we want to make sure that the community benefits, the nation benefits, and in what way, what does those benefits look like? And I think, that's could be jobs, it could be revenue generation, many things. And I think that's the area that we're exploring at Department of Energy, is how can we be creative and create sort of these models, but also use the private sector to be a partner to tribes. And I think that's the part that I'm seeing. We need more capacity building on, how do you apply for an LPO grant or application, not grant, but an application. And who's going to support them? And our office can do very little, but there has to be some entity that is trustworthy too. That's the part that I feel like could be a role for you all, or somebody that could be that trusted entity that can help support, tribes go through a process and really come out with a model that really, can outshine what we have today. So that's something that I'm interested in exploring more.
Cody, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, not repeat what Wahleah said. Wahleah's right, 100% everything she said. And one thing we got to really look at now, because, Kate Barnes and Shawn Watts and their foundations are on this call, and there's other foundations also within this call as well, to really, really look at is now, creating these bridges to do just what Wahleah is saying. But not only that, but being native led, I also feel like is really important, because, natives, trusting natives is a lot more easier to relate to when we create these bridges. sometimes it's hard for foundations or private sector funding to come right into tribes, like Wahleah was saying, because it's two different cultures, right? And sometimes it's hard to understand what we're saying here and how to put their plan in action, and what the foundations are requesting or wanting. So organizations like Indigenized Energy Initiative, and I'm sure there's other organizations out there that are helping tribes as well. That's what the important piece of why this work is so important today, is to create that avenue, to create that path, to bring more resources to Native tribes in a way that we are looking out for them, for the best interests of them, and that we are making sure that these foundation monies are doing what they're supposed to be doing in Indian country. That's the most important piece too, so we can fulfill those foundations' missions and what they want to give money towards as well. So just by being that middleman and that piece to making sure that everything runs smoothly, that people are looking out for the tribes, also looking out for the foundations, I think is really, really important moving forward. So the more bridges we can create like IEI, I think the better off we're going to be on having more successful projects within Indian country.
It's such a great point. I'm going to go to Kate next. I just wanted to say, I think, the problem, Cody, sometimes is just that organizations like yours don't fit very well into each of these specific silos. You're not just an intermediary, you're not just a capacity builder. That's the whole point, right? You're helping with that glue between these different sectors that you're trying to bring, and you're being that translator and that trusted partner too. So it's just a great point. Kate, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I was just going to say, to put a finer point on what Cody is talking about, one of the things I think private foundations can do in this regard is to provide as flexible of support as possible. Leah and Cody, and we've all just sort of laid out how complicated this network of funds is that's needed to actually achieve the end goal of energy sovereignty and clean energy transition. And where private philanthropy can come in is to provide flexible support so that our dollars can go where they're needed, when they're needed. And that can either be through general operating support, or if you're funding organizations like IEI that have a fiscal sponsor, structuring the grant so that support is as flexible as possible. If there are funders on this call who don't know how to structure flexible support grants for fiscally sponsored projects, I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more with them directly. So just reach out. But it's a really important message that we've gotten from our grantees, is that that's often how our funds are used, and maintaining that sort of 36,000 foot perspective of the larger project and the larger goal and where your funding fits in with that, I think is really key to that.
Yeah, those are some great points too. I think with a lot of this work, it's also so iterative, right? It's not like we just understand what we need to do and can write like a 1 or 2 year project grant and say, here's our outcomes. This is deep, hard work. So that flexible general operating kind of funding is what needs to happen if we're actually going to be able to lead this work ourselves. We've got a few more minutes. I wanted to just give an opportunity to Shawn, if you had any additional reflections, and then we might round it out with just maybe one more question.
Well, Kate stole exactly, well, not stole. Okay, she said exactly what I was going to say, which is that it's not just that we support, but how we support, and that ends up making a big difference. I would just say, if you're a funder and you care about the people, and funders care about different things, and that's okay. Some funders really want to save the rainforest. Some really want to save species, whatever it happens to be, that's okay. But if you're focused on the people, and we're talking specifically about Indigenous people, the way you structure your support matters even more than it would normally, because you cannot be supporting Indigenous people if you're not supporting self-determination. And you can't be supporting self-determination and attaching strings to how the money gets used.
Yeah, those are, I think, incredibly important points. I'm going to just go ahead and ask one final question here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. We had a comment that philanthropic money usually equals one-off projects. Philanthropic money plus federal money and partnerships can equal pipelines of projects to support industry growth and lasting impact. How does this conversation compare to a handout versus a hand up? Or, put another way, where do you see some of this change happening in the work that you're seeing in actually bringing this cross-sector work together in a lasting way? And are you seeing more funders start to realize where they can be investing in ways that aren't just about one-off projects? Would just love anyone's thoughts on that. Cody, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just got a couple of comments. And what you
Sure.
said is, handouts are always good, but we have to really be cautious on making sure we're not still making people dependent on a system, right? So we have to utilize those handouts in a way that we create a hand up for our people. And that's exactly what you said, Erik, is exactly the point on why, renewable energy is so important within Indian country, and why providing those tools to people on the ground is so important. But I think, the question that you had there, Erik, is, how could that make a difference in a way where it does empower people on the ground? And I think, just for some of the things that I've experienced within Indian country and how philanthropy can really make a difference in Indian country is just that. Is I think we have to have a new way of thinking about what philanthropy really does on the ground. Because I think we're in a time now that, I think we're beyond awareness at this point. Erik, I think we've had a lot of great awareness campaigns in the last 10 years. And I think it's really important now to really hone in on the people that are actually doing the work. I think that's the most important piece, that's really doing the work on the ground to make that change. And, the awareness that we're created to actually make that change on the ground and make that difference on the impacts we're creating today. So very, very much important in a way of exactly what you just said, is that, we're not, as Native people, when we utilize federal funds or we utilize philanthropy dollars or foundation dollars, we can't look at it as a way as a handout no more. We have to make sure we utilize those dollars in a way that's going to impact these communities in a positive way, that we can continue to flourish. And like Wahleah says, she's seen a couple tribes in the past that starting to just do a couple pilot projects. And what happens is that it plants those seeds, and all of a sudden it just expand and blow up. And sometimes that's all it really takes, is to just be able to give them that little bit of a handout that provides them that hand up to make sure they can really flourish moving forward. But to provide them tools on the ground is so much more important. And I think somebody had a question in the chat that, some tribes out there, you're right, that they don't have the accessibility of paying grant writers, different things like that. It's tough to hold, and then not only that, but to maintain a grant is also a tough thing to do for Indian country, because they don't have those offices. So that's why, in organizations like, IEI or other organizations like Wahleah, different other people can help assist tribes in doing just that, moving forward in a good way to making sure that they're spending the money the way it's supposed to be spent, and then impacting the communities the way they're supposed to be impacted. But very, very powerful words there, Erik, and thank you for saying that.
Well, thank you. We are actually at time, and we could definitely have this conversation go on for some time. I'm just going to close by just sharing kind of what, our commitment at NAP to this work and to this partnership. Everything I've heard resonates so much with what we've been listening to communities across the country tell us, whether it's energy, whether it's education, protection of lands and waterways. There's something very different happening now. I agree with you, Cody. This isn't just about awareness anymore. We have leadership across the country, our own leadership, that's actually helped break us free of this deficit narrative that we've struggled with for so long, this dependability on federal grants, pigeonholing our vision for our communities into these, splice and dice funding streams. And that's changing. And hopefully all of you got a sense of that in this energy sovereignty space just here today. There is so much untapped potential. And so what NAP, wants to continue to do is to host more conversations like this, but we're also going to be bringing together lots of other kind of working group kind of conversations with the organizations that are serving in that capacity building intermediary space, with our technical partners, definitely finding new ways to bring our federal partners together with funders for focused, targeted conversations about the best ways that we can help leverage those resources, and to also think about how we can build up some of that capacity, because we have heard loud and clear across the country from our tribes, our tribal organizations, there are different levels of capacity. Every tribe is different, every tribal organization is different. And organizations like ours and others who understand how those resources are and aren't flowing really need to do more work to, help build up that capacity and figure out how to help tribes achieve what they need to without all these barriers that are really getting in the way of their vision. So just want to thank you, first of all of our panelists for joining us here today. I'm revved up about this. I want to do more in this energy space now more than ever. And we're going to be following up with an email sharing all the resources that were here, and any other conversations or events that we're going to be hosting. We'll definitely be following up with all of you too. We're really looking forward to continuing to work with our partners here to build a stronger movement in philanthropy around these kinds of partnerships. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a good rest of the week and a restful weekend.